Dueling interests. Sparring sessions and mock duels were not uncommon aboard the Sanguinium Martyrs. When not fighting the enemies of the Imperium, it was the only way Mashes and his retinue could stay sharp, and it did provide a brief bit of distraction from the stressors of the world around them. Mashes faced off against Nikolai, the Valhallan sliding into a defensive position. Unlike Alexis, who went for a more open stance, Nikolai shored himself up to better receive and deliver blows. Mashes circled Nikolai slowly, his eyes scanning his opponent in search of an opening. Sensing one, Mashes darted in, swinging his right arm around for an overhead strike. Nikolai had anticipated this, ducking under Mashes' attack before twisting around and lashing out with a quick elbow jab. Mashes rolled with the strike, using Nikolai's own momentum to shift his position and arrive behind the trooper. Nikolai sensed the danger and tried to escape, but before he could get away Mashes had grabbed him from behind and twisted again, the sudden shift breaking Nikolai's stance and sending the Valhallan tumbling to the ground. "And the Inquisitor wins," Alexis said from the sidelines, setting aside a variety of weapons Mashes had asked him to gather. "You're getting a bit faster, my lord." "That's what you say every time he wins," Nikolai mumbled as Mashes released him. Mashes merely rolled his eyes, letting out a short breath before walking over to Alexis and the weapons cache. "Thank you for the weapons," Mashes said, turning his attention fully to Alexis. "Now that you're finished with that, you can start combat training." Mashes fought back a small smile as he saw the Valhallan pale even more. Maybe I'll just observe, for training purposes and all." He stammered. "I am a delicate soldier, I can't take more breaking." "Always scared to fight me, aren't you?" Mashes said. "I wasn't challenging you. Go practice with your brother for a few minutes." Alexis gave a short nod, though it would be some time before his complexion would return. As Alexis removed his coat for better maneuverability, Mashes spotted Sister Bianca stepping into the room, Angelique following in the Hospitaler's shadow. "Lord Mashes, a word?" she asked once she had settled Angelique into a comfortable spot. Mashes nodded and crossed over to Bianca, sidestepping Alexis as he was laid out on the training room floor. "Is something the matter, sister?" he asked. "Perhaps." Bianca cast a quick glance towards Angelique before continuing. "I have had some reservations concerning our passengers, especially the one that calls herself Celeste." "You mean other than the fact that she's dodged all of our inquiries into who she is and where the Emperor is? Though I hold my utmost reverence for him, I cannot understand why he would choose someone so unsettling." Bianca shivered, a rare sight from the usually pleasant sister. "I have not spoken to her much during our trip, but even standing in the same room as her makes me feel like a child." "A child?" "Specifically one being scolded by her sister superior." Bianca shook her head before continuing. "I do not mean any disrespect towards the woman, but she carries herself with much more regality than a simple herald should. I will be the first to admit there is something about Celeste that I have not seen in many others." Mashes looked over his shoulder to the two sparring Valhallans. "Alexis and Nikolai didn't tell me about anything out of the ordinary, though, and I doubt Lord Marcos would be in any mood to discuss Celeste properly. I'd ask more of her, but," he shrugged, Bianca nodding in understanding. "The light is good, though," Angelique mumbled. "The screams of the lost seem so far away now." "That's another thing I have noticed." Bianca looked towards Angelique. "Angelique has been much more lucid than usual." "That doesn't tell me much. I've caught her sneaking out of her quarters a few times since we departed Tau space." Bianca looked back to Mashes. "It's more of her usual wanderings, but several times she has looped towards the guest quarters where Celeste and Terra are staying." Mashes finished. "They both claim to be psychers, skilled ones at that. Perhaps there is some kind of link that they share. It's not unheard of, but I don't think that is the case. The fact remains that when Angelique returns, she is much more coherent than when she remains unattended. It might be that Celeste affects Angelique differently than she affects you and I. I would ask her why, but I believe it may have to do with the Emperor's influence on her life." "Really?" Mashes asked, one eyebrow raised. "The Emperor's presence affects us all in different ways, Mashes." Bianca gave a small smile. His light may be enough for Angelique to focus on and clear her mind. Mashes was not one to doubt Bianca's reasoning. He was strong in his faith, sure enough, but the sisters had a closer connection the Emperor that not many truly understood. Still, Bianca's information would have to be attended to closely. Carefully as well, lest the herald assume that Mashes and the others were conspiring with one another. "Do you think you can keep a closer watch on Angelique?" he said. "Perhaps find out what she's speaking to the herald for." "I could try, but understand that I have no desire to intrude too deeply into the life of the Emperor's herald. That would be improper of me." "I understand, but any information on Celeste or Terra that you can glean before our arrival would be greatly appreciated." Bianca gave a short nod, though Mashes could tell she was still uncomfortable with the idea. As the Hospitaller turned her attention towards Angelique, who had started picking at something on the floor, Mashes' attention was drawn back towards the door, spotting movement just at the edge of his field of view as Terra stepped into the room. "Glad to see she's getting used to the ship." "Oh, am I interrupting anything?" she asked, taking a small step back. "I was just exploring a bit and some of the crew told me to head here, because that's where you were." "We're just holding sparring practice, nothing more," Mashes replied, his words punctuated by the sound of Nikolai tossing Alexis against the ground. "Though some of us probably need more practice than others." "Oh." Terra nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "May I watch?" "I don't see why you shouldn't." Mashes paused. "Who knows, what you learn here might end up saving your life someday." "Maybe. I mean, I'm not much of a fighter or anything, I probably wouldn't know much about what you're doing." Mashes quirked an eyebrow at this. As a codicillor she might not have had much reason to fear for her life, but that would have been before she was taken as a student of the Emperor's herald. "Well, it's never too late to learn." Terra blinked a few times as Mashes crossed over to the weapons Alexis had brought in. He found one, an older power sword that had gotten shuffled into the mix, and took a moment to gauge its weight before turning back to Terra. "Here, this should be good for a woman of your size." I am not sure if this is a good idea," Terra stammered. "I've never handled a sword before in my life." "As long as you don't turn on the power field, we should be fine." Terra hesitated before gingerly taking the sword from Mashes, raising and lowering it a few times to adjust to its weight. Mashes turned away to retrieve a sword of his own while Angelique mumbled something about marais and snakes. "Now, the first thing you want to work on is your grip," Mashes said as he took a position across from Terra. "If your grip is too loose, you'll drop the sword the first time someone strikes at you. Too firm, and you'll lose a bit of dexterity and risk having all the energy from a strike get shoved into your arm. Like this." Terra held up her hand to show Mashes. "Whatever makes you feel most comfortable," Mashes replied. Terra adjusted her grip again before Mashes continued. "Next, we're going to deal with a couple of simple parries. Once you've mastered those, you should be off to a good start." "No fancy moves or anything like that?" Terra asked, Mashes unsure if she was joking or not. "Those will come later. Always learn how to block before you learn how to kill something, it will probably save your life." Terra gave a quick series of nods, holding her sword up as Mashes readied his blade. "Now, let's say for a moment that your opponent comes in for a short stab, like this." Mashes readied himself and lunged forward, keeping his left hand free while the sword darted forward. To his surprise Terra did not shrink away, as most new recruits did when faced with the possibility of being stabbed, instead bringing her own sword down quickly to swat Mashes' weapon away. There was a pause as her eyes darted from the sword to Mashes. "Was that good?" she asked. "Well, you're taking to it well, at least," Mashes replied. "But you can't just stop your motions like that. If you do," Mashes slid his sword out from under Terra's and swept out, the sword stopping inches away from her neck. "Then your opponent has a chance to get around your defenses, and you will have no chance to stop him." Oh, Terra stammered, taking a few steps away. "Can we try that again?" "Of course." Mashes drew back to his original stance. "Let's try that lunge again, only this time try to be a bit smoother with your actions." Terra nodded, bringing her sword up as she faced off against Mashes. There was a pause before Mashes darted forward again, Terra once more bringing her sword down on top of Mashes. Only this time, as he drew up to go for her neck, she brought the sword up and managed to slow Mashes' strike, even if only a little. Much better, Mashes nodded. I have to say, you're a quick study. Thanks. Terra beamed. I've always been good with information. I guess that doesn't always apply to books, now does it? Guess not. Mashes found himself grinning. The girl was incredibly choppy with her movements, but her attitude carried more towards endearing than dangerous. Naive optimism radiated from her, and such optimism could be refined for greater purpose. A little more training, and perhaps she would be a great fighter someday. He just had to make sure that she survived to see that day. Even if she was not the most inconspicuous of people, Celestia was more than able to stick to the shadows outside of Twilight or Masha's view. She stood in silence, watching every strike and parry that the two practiced. Twilight would need much more practice, but she was a good student, she would progress quickly, and hopefully be ready to face the challenges of the Imperium. I suppose I can help her along, she thought. Subtly, for now, once I reveal myself, her training can become more direct. Celestia's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of boots against metal. She did not need to shift her attention as Lord Inquisitor Marcos approached, the man pausing only for a moment as he spotted her. What are you doing here? He asked, voice still as hard as ever. It is no crime in watching over one's student, Celestia replied, keeping her gaze fixed on Twilight. And am I not allowed some modicum of freedom? A training room is hardly a restricted area. And yet you lurk in the shadows. Marcos countered. Not all of us need to make our presence known with bluster. Marcos' frown grew deeper as Celestia continued. But I presume you are not here merely to discuss my observation. We will be arriving within Segmentum Solar in a few days, Marcos replied. By the time the month is out, we'll be in the Sol system, and from there the approach to Terra remains. As a sworn servant of the Emperor of Mankind, it is my duty to make sure that potential threats are destroyed before they even get so close to the seat of humanity. You consider me a threat now? Celestia asked, her voice devoid of surprise. Paranoia can lead one to many places, Inquisitor, more often than not straight into the gates of hell. Are you threatening me, witch? If I meant to threaten you, there would have been no need to question me. Celestia turned her attention back to Twilight and Mashes. They had stopped their sparring for now, the young Inquisitor now inspecting Twilight's grip on her sword. If you are so certain that I am a threat, why keep questioning me? Why not put a last bolt between my eyes and end it right now? Because the young Inquisitor is still certain that you are the Emperor's herald. Marcos' gaze drifted towards the Inquisitor. And he has the confidence of the Ordos. Had he truly considered his mission, he would have scoured that region of space until a more forthcoming candidate was found, but instead he chose you. Pathetic. I do not see optimism to be pathetic, Inquisitor, Celestia replied. Dangerous when not tempered with reason, perhaps, but not pathetic. Was it not childlike faith in the strength of humanity that led us to conquer the stars? Was it not the belief in the indomitable right of man that inspired thousands to reject the allures of chaos? Was it not faith and courage that let guardsman Pius stand before the warm aster of chaos and save the Emperor's life? You select only a few outliers to make your point impossible to argue against. It would not be the first time, Celestia thought. If you were truly operating for the Imperium's benefit, you would tell us of the Emperor's location now so we do not have to waste more time searching for him. As I said, my information is not meant for you. Celestia looked away from Twilight and Mashes to focus on Marcos. I was ordered to speak only to the High Lords of Terra. Once that task is complete, the Emperor will be revealed. And who is to say that you won't just rip open a warp portal and tear the heart out of the Imperium in one stroke? Celestia stifled a scoff. Perhaps I was wrong about you, Marcos, she said, her voice dropping. Perhaps it isn't that your faith is strong, perhaps it is that you have reached a point where the only person who is not a traitor is yourself. If Marcos had been trying to conceal his rage before, he was utterly failing to do so now. I can have you executed for questioning my loyalty. He growled. And challenge the Emperor's will. Celestia replied, folding her arms across her chest. Some would consider that heresy of the highest order. This did not seem to break Marco's ire, and Celestia could feel a bad taste forming at the back of her throat. Was it really so easy to give in to the temptations of divine exploitation like that? Then again, you have been allowing your subjects to worship you for 1,000 years, a small voice whispered from the back of her mind. I have tried my best to remain civil, Marcos started, his voice low. I have made concessions with the young inquisitor, with your student, and with you. But I am still an inquisitor of the Imperium of mankind, and I cannot tolerate any further insults, challenges, and avoidance that you seem to enjoy so much. You may have tricked the Ordo Xenos into trusting you, but as soon as your plotting falls apart I will be the first to see you brought to ruin. Do not let your arrogance cloud your judgment. Celestia turned back to the sparring match before her. Great men have fallen to ruin in the belief that their path was infallible, and those that survived their fall were treated as the lowest of the low. The Inquisitor gave no further response beyond another glare, marching past Celestia and out of sight. I would know the dangers of arrogance, Celestia thought, watching in silence as Mashes helped Twilight up after she had tripped. I was the greatest of man, after all.